Well, hi everyone, and thank you for having me back to talk about some reflections on my assignment that used ChatGPT as a writing coach and how I'm going to change it this summer. I did workshop this assignment with Professor Coralie Carlson in my News Literacy in a Digital Age class, so shout out to her. This is a journalism class that teaches students how to find fact-based and credible information online and how to become their own fact checker. It's also a writing course that fulfills the English Composition 2 Gen Ed requirement. So we do several different types of writing assignments, including an analytical essay analyzing the credibility of a news story. So I'm reworking the first version of this ChatGPT coaching assignment this summer to make it better, because this fall I'm actually teaching 12 sections of news literacy in a digital age with 8 other adjuncts, so about 200 students. So it's really important that I come up with something that is going to work for both the faculty and the students. So let me share my screen. Okay, so I want to start off telling you a little bit about what I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share my reflections on the spring semester and also my revisions. So I'll briefly tell you how the first assignment worked, share ChatGPT's interactions with a typical student, faculty reflections, and then student reflections as well. And then I will share with you my new prompt, my new rubric, my new instructions to students, and my new instructions to faculty. So first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about the assignment just so you get the gist of it. Students have to deconstruct this essay in New York Magazine. It's actually about Hunter College, about the failing infrastructure. And they have to write a first draft of this analytical essay determining its credibility. They have to apply their key course concepts to verify the evidence and the sources. They have to use our readings and include lots of quotes. They have to examine the article for fairness and transparency. And they have to produce a thesis explaining why the article is credible and take evidence support from our readings. So we used ChatGPT. They have to write the first draft in a Google Doc. And we used ChatGPT as a writing coach for their final version of this paper. Now, here's the prompt that I used. Let me just move this. You are a helpful, friendly, interactive, wait a minute, I'm just having a little trouble with my screen here. Just move these. There we go. You are a helpful, friendly, and interactive writing coach named Linguo who helps a student improve their analytical essay in these domains: crafting a clear thesis statement that serves as a blueprint for the essay, incorporating quoted materials correctly according to MLA standards, and providing a clear and focused expository structure with detailed evidence-based arguments that support a thesis. So this is the initial prompt. And here I have Linguo. He is actually the grammar robot from The Simpsons. And I based this prompt very much off of one by Ethan Mollick, who I think is amazing. And he inspired this exercise. Here's the second part of the prompt, where I asked Linguo to provide suggestions based on the rubric and to highlight the areas that were successful, so to give the student encouragement for what they're already doing right, and for the areas that need improvement. But you'll see I did put in this last line, hint, the student should be the one revising their essay with your suggestions and encouragement. So that was meant to stop ChatGPT from actually rewriting any part of their essay. Here's the problem. Even though I explicitly told them to only offer suggestions, like you see here, he ended up rewriting at least one sentence of the student's work with every suggestion that he made. Then he would say, could you try revising, for example, your conclusion with that added reflection? And then I would be happy to review it. But once the students see a line that's already rewritten like that, they are very likely to just adopt it. So that was a real problem in the assignment. And when we discussed our findings and we talked about how to improve this assignment, that was definitely one of the problems. Too much rewriting. ChatGPT rewrote student work even though the prompt explicitly told it not to do so. Another problem, sometimes Linguo gave good advice, sometimes it made their writing boring and generic. And our grading time doubled. Now, it was the first time we did this, but we were grading both drafts. We were comparing them to the ChatGPT interaction, plus we were reading their reflection. And this was very time consuming. So those were some of our, preliminary takeaways. Now, on the positives, there was some very good feedback, particularly on organization. Some students just don't know how to organize their essays. On flow, like transitions from paragraph to paragraph, and definitely on writing mechanics. It also effectively pointed out weaknesses like a lack of context or in-depth analysis. It was also helpful for students who, just didn't know where to start. They didn't know how to improve their essay or they had writer's block. And we also found it particularly helpful for ESL students. The negatives. The suggestions, and this is a big one, often made the writing very bland or formulaic, very generic sounding. The suggestions did not apply our key course concepts. And of course, it hasn't taken our course, so how would it know what our 5 key lessons are or what some of the tools or strategies are that the students need to apply to evaluate the credibility of this article? The suggestions also often removed journalism terms, right, that we had taught them, that we wanted them to use in their essay. And many students, really aren't confident enough writers. So when they see that AI has written something that sounds good, that sounds academic and smart, they really don't think they can do any better, and it just ends up in their essay. I will show you a couple of examples. So here is an opening line. So I always ask the students to come up with an engaging opening line. And this student had, there is no doubt Hunter College is a bit of a fixer-upper, but according to Willie Blackmore's article, Hunter College is falling down. The campus is in a state of crisis. This is what ChatGPT offered, and unfortunately, the student adopted it. Today, Americans are highly skeptical of journalism, so journalists must make sure they are doing their best to show their credibility. So generic, so removed from the article that the student is evaluating, and definitely made the opening line worse. Here's an example of it, making the thesis worse. Blackmore's article is reliable as it uses eyewitness sources, provides direct and indirect evidence, and is transparent about how the information was gathered. So this is the student thesis. Of course, could be written better, but it does meet a lot of our requirements. It's a multi-pronged thesis. It's a blueprint for the rest of the essay. It's using the terms that we've taught them. And in comes ChatGPT and writes, he supports his claims about Hunter College's structural problems with firsthand testimonies, photographs, multiple sources, making his reporting more trustworthy. Again, the student adopted that, and it definitely was not as good as what they had written themselves. What's interesting, though, is that the students actually thought ChatGPT was helpful. So the average here is 3.2, so it was at least somewhat helpful for most students in the course. And what they said is 60% said that helped them correct grammatical errors. About half said it provided encouragement throughout the coaching process. About 40% said it helped them improve the essay structure, thesis, arguments, and analysis. And also 40% on the downside said it did try to rewrite my essay, even though the prompt told it not to. And then finally, 1/3, these up here, provided clear and useful feedback, offered suggestions that made my draft worse, but provided a personalized learning experience at my own pace. So kind of a mixed bag, but when I asked the students, would you use ChatGPT or another generative AI tool again as a writing coach in another class, if allowed by your professor? And everyone said yes or maybe. So nobody said no. So, I think that's good. And here are also some of their comments that I got from their reflections. I'm not going to read them all, but students said that ChatGPT helped them get started and made the process less overwhelming, that the exercise was fun and made them less skeptical of ChatGPT, that with the right prompts, you could get good advice, and that it is a useful tool that they really and that they really appreciated the positivity, right? That it was pointing out what they were doing well and actually areas that they could improve in. On the downside, students actually were, very self-reflective and said, I'm concerned about becoming too reliant on ChatGPT. Of course, we all are concerned about that. I capitalized do not write in the original prompt. The biggest takeaway from the expository writing exercise is just how unreliable the chatbot is at writing essays. In fact, one student said that the text was just so bad that they would just use it for generating ideas or discussing ideas. And another said that that he couldn't believe that the ChatGPT couldn't write in his own voice, even though he had a whole essay to base the style off of, and that they found that it defaults to that robotic tone. So here's my new ChatGPT Writing Coach 2.0. I have fired Linguo. ChatGPT is now just a nameless, friendly, and helpful writing coach tasked with giving feedback based on a new and more detailed rubric. So I've also adjusted the prompt. It's very similar, but I've added 2 key lines here. As a coach, you should only provide feedback and never rewrite my work. And please guide me through the revising process without rewriting sentences for me. So those are 2 key lines that I found really made a difference in the output, because I did test this with numerous student papers and this new rubric. So this is a revised rubric that has a lot of detail, especially under exemplary, that we are going to give to ChatGPT, everything except this bottom reflection. So the students get 10 points for doing a reflection after the exercise. So that will not be included in what we give the writing coach. But it will be fed these very detailed instructions on what they need to do well. And I changed my directions to the students as well, to give them more agency to reject suggestions that don't make sense, right? Or make their writing worse. I tell them it is up to you to determine if the suggestions improve your essay, and if they don't, ignore them, right? I remind them how this exercise is meant to work, and that if it's not going as it's designed, right? If ChatGPT is starting to write their work, that they need to put it back on track themselves. So, they are the ones training their ChatGPT writing coach, and they are responsible for how ChatGPT acts in this exercise. And the final note, that the best practice really is for them to integrate ChatGPT's suggestion into their own words and voice. But if they do incorporate anything that's AI written into their paper, that they have to cite it. So let me show you what I got back from ChatGPT this time. It actually looks very different from this spring. You'll see here that even the format is different. It's set up more as a table, and it's linking the rubric expectation to an observation of what the writing coach saw in their essay, and then a revision prompt. And they really did not rewrite entire sentences like it did the first go round. And then I like this too. It has next steps, pick a Cantor Twilly quote and write a short bridge sentence directly linking it to the Chen reporting, right? Here on writing style and organization, it's encouraging the student to rewrite their 66-word opening sentence. Very good advice. Starting each paragraph with a point sentence, followed by evidence and analysis, and following up with those next steps at the bottom. So I'm excited about how this looks. I like the output a lot better than all that rewriting that it was doing the first time around. Of course, we have to, test it out with my students this summer. And my goals for this ChatGPT Writing Coach 2.0, what I really want is to give ChatGPT more guidance on how to interact with the students, right? And have it more related to the learning outcomes, to what we're looking for, in terms of applying the course materials. That's all now very explicit in the rubric. I also want to give students much more agency to train and redirect ChatGPT. So I'm going to be very explicit about that. I'm also going to remind students that they have to critically evaluate ChatGPT's suggestions and reject those that don't make sense. ChatGPT is actually not that good a writer. And students need to interact with it to really come to understand that. And, to save time for faculty, because the grading was very tedious this last time, it took quite a bit of time to go over everything. We're now going to have students do their first draft, do this interaction with ChatGPT, and then meet in our writing conference. So we're no longer going to be grading that first draft, but we are going to be meeting with students to go over, where they are after the ChatGPT talk. So they can ask us, was this a good suggestion by ChatGPT? Or I wasn't sure about this, or I still don't understand, how to make the evidence better in this paragraph. So I think the writing conference will definitely help students in terms of understanding which suggestions from ChatGPT make most sense and which don't. And then we will go ahead and grade the final draft and also the reflection. So that's it. Yeah. Any questions or comments?